Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Human Element. Today I'm speaking with Kyle Wilhoit, Technical Director at Unit 42 Threat Intelligence, Palo Alto Networks. We're recording this live in Las Vegas near Black Hat 2025. So Kyle, thanks for joining me. Would you start by telling us a bit about your journey so far?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ben. It's a real distinct pleasure to be here and a distinct pleasure to talk to you after working alongside you for so many years. A little bit about myself. As you mentioned, I'm a tech director at Unit 42, where I basically try to solve complex problems. And that's everything from deep-seated research into nation-state adversaries, all the way down to looking at zero-day exploits that are kind of propagating across the internet. So I actually kind of started my research career actually working alongside you at an old company that we used to work at, Trend Micro. And
I think I may have hired you.
I think you literally were the one that hired me. So I started my research career directly under you and just kind of started from there, and then went into people leadership about six years ago, and then stepped back into research again a year ago. So kind of ebbing and flowing between the people leadership aspect of my role as well as the research side. So yeah, I get to kind of go back and forth between them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about some of the life events that have kind of changed your approach to leadership.
Yeah. So funny enough, I think having kids was the number one way to impact me from a leadership perspective. And I say that because you have to truly understand the emotional aspect of individuals. In the past, as you can, definitely probably relate to, the human element of our work is not something that inherently comes naturally to me. Like understanding the human element of how folks work is not something that inherently is something that I know.
Something you have to learn.
Something you have to learn, at least for me.
Yeah.
And having kids made me realize that I needed to learn those aspects. And when I take what I've learned from raising my kids and I apply that to the leadership side, it really allows me to kind of dial in from an emotional intelligence perspective to really understand, hey, what is going on in this individual's life that might be impacting their work, or it might be in a positive or negative way, right? But from my perspective, I'd say that's probably the number one thing that impacted me and really truly made me realize that I did want to go into people leadership, is trying to guide folks, trying to guide them into that. So I'd say parenting and having children was the number one thing that impacted me from being a leader, which I know sounds a bit strange because it's kind of merging that personal with professional.
It makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
Like there's that moment when your first is born where it's like, okay, your mind suddenly shifts. It's not about you.
It's not about you. Yeah. Exactly. And my needs and wants don't really matter that much anymore, considering what you're up against. And I feel the same way with people leadership. Your needs and wants get minimized for the needs and wants of your employees that work for you.
Yeah. And the organization.
And the organization, of course.
Yeah, definitely. What non-technical skills have had the most impact on your career? You probably said the first one, the biggest one.
Yeah, communication. Being able to effectively communicate. And that's something that I learned from you also back in Trend Micro, actually, funny enough, Ben, is how to effectively communicate. And that's everything from all the emotional intelligence stuff that we were just talking about, but also technical components, right? So meaning breaking down highly technical concepts into easy to understand research and digestible research. Yep. That is a skill set that is hard to cultivate, hard to master, but if you can get to the point where you feel comfortable with it, it's a very powerful skill set. So concise and clear communication is something that is a differentiator, I think, in our industry, and specifically in threat research as well, where you're constantly, as you know, dealing with complex subject matter, complex things that need to be broken down simply.
Yeah. Have you encountered the pattern where the higher level of intelligence you're dealing with, the harder they have to work to communicate
Absolutely.
with other people?
That's 100%, Ben. I mean, that is, I think, common plight across computer security and computer engineering in general, right? Is oftentimes the higher you get in the technical ranks, the harder it is to communicate because, it's more technical as
you're dealing with
exactly
deeper detail.
Exactly. Yep.
Tell me about a mistake you've made that had led to personal growth.
I would say underestimating specific projects that I thought were going to be completed in an earlier time frame, meaning, saying, oh yeah, this will take 6 months to complete, when in actuality, if you really take into account all of the variables involved, it really took 9 to 10 months. So I'd say missing the mark on project deliverables in terms of timing. And that was early on in my leadership style, or early on in people leadership, because I didn't quite know how to estimate others' workloads and how to estimate, what exactly are those individuals going to be contributing to the project, timing-wise, et cetera. And then over time, those are learned skills that I at least picked up over time, was how to better estimate that timing, et cetera. So I'd say that early on, that was the biggest challenge that I had, that ultimately you have to overcome if you want to at least be a successful leader, in my opinion.
And then that comes back to the EQ, figuring out where your people are.
Exactly. Yep. Precisely.
One of my favorite phrases recently is, we do these things not because they're easy, because we thought they were going to be easy. Is there an individual in your history that had a significant impact on your career?
I'd say there's two people. One is my brother. He is just kind of the engineer in the family that literally tinkers and breaks things apart to try to know how they function.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember even as a kid sitting down with my brother and him taking apart toys to see how they function and me being enamored by that. So I'd say, first of all, my brother from a personal perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say professionally, there's a few different folks. I'd say Martin Rosler from Trend Micro days, really great leader in terms of leading us through a lot of different areas, a lot of different subject matter. I'd say you as well, Ben, frankly. I think that,
cheating.
But I mean, honestly, you hired me in as my first research position and you took a gamble on me and you took a chance on me. So I'm forever grateful for that. And I've learned from you to constantly, and as I mentioned earlier or before, the what if question, right? Mm-hmm. Constantly asking, what if you did this? What if? Constantly being curious and constantly wondering those things. I'd say also Joe Opaki. He was a previous leader of mine here at Unit 42, as well as at Palo Alto Networks. And he taught me the people aspect pretty well, meaning how to properly be a leader to individuals at your company. Mm-hmm. How to properly motivate them, how to properly guide them, how to properly set goals and objectives, which is something that as a leader, as you're a new leader, that's something you're not really accustomed to, especially coming from a deep research background.
Yeah, it's a skill you don't have.
It's a skill I don't have. So all of those things are not only hurdles that I overcame as part of that, but those individuals really helped, including yourself, helped kind of guide me down that path. Yeah.
To be clear, I didn't mean you didn't have the skill. I mean, as a new leader, you don't have that skill.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not calling you out for missing that. What's the most valuable lesson you've learned from an incident or a problem, an event?
I would say keeping calm under pressure. Mm-hmm. I work very closely with the incident response team on Unit 42 as part of incident response engagements. Yep. And researching and performing possible attribution to threat actors behind the attacks, et cetera. Yep. The number one thing that I worked, and this was prior to, I learned this kind of in the field at Unit 42, was when there's a high profile incident occurring that's impacting multiple customers and or multiple endpoint environments, staying cool is the number one thing you can do. Right? Maintain a level head, maintain a level presence, because that's what your individual contributors look to for a sense of stability. Yeah. And ensuring during an incident response engagement that you are that kind of rock in the ocean, if you will, that your team can rely upon. That's the most important aspect you can do. And that's the most important aspect that you can kind of bring to the table as a leader as part of that threat research and incident response mentality or incident response kind of function. Yep. So I'd say keeping calm under pressure is the number one thing that you can do specifically in this. And that's something that I learned, kind of in the field as it went.
The hard way.
Yeah, the hard way. Yeah.
I mean, I would almost say that's counterintuitive. I totally agree with you. It's absolutely right. But like as a new leader, your first thought is, all right, something's going wrong. I need to take all these actions right now.
And take control.
And really the best thing you can do is be that stable and
precisely.
And just let people key into the fact that you're not panicking. They can do their job. Exactly. You trust them to do their job.
And act as a traffic cop. Yeah. Say, go out and perform this, and make sure that everybody is designated on a task. Yep. And that way it's structured and organized. Yeah. And that allows you as the leader to really slow down, think about things logically, especially during these types of events. Yeah. And then, structuring things properly. So
I mean, there's an interesting side aspect there, which is as the leader, one of the things I've found I've had to do, and I'm just curious if this matches your experience, is being the authorization to make decisions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
absolutely,
there's a lot going on. There's a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot of information moving around. And junior resources are suddenly thrust in this situation where they're like, I don't want to make this worse. I don't want to screw this up. Yeah. And sometimes just reassuring that
100%,
you've got as much information as I have. That sounds like the right way to go. Yeah. And it's like, I'm taking that. I've got the risk. Is that?
Yeah, you hit on something that I when you asked about some of the challenges encountered in leadership is decision ambiguity. And that is exactly what you're describing. And that is every new leader is hit with this. Sure. Meaning, am I making the right decision? Is this going to impact the business in a negative way? Yeah. Or in a positive way? But absolutely. I mean, as a new leader, the decision ambiguity is one of the largest challenges because, again, you're dealing with the multi-component of dealing with individual contributors and that fallout and what could happen, as well as the business side impact, right? If you make a business decision that impacts the business, that's impactful.
Right.
So you're straddling that line in between the business and the people element and the technical element and trying to balance that in such a way that none of that is off kilter in any way. So you've hit the nail on the head. The decision ambiguity is a distinct challenge, especially as a new leader, in my opinion.
What's the most rewarding aspect of your job?
Honestly, one of the most rewarding aspects of my role was when I became a leader and I got the first person that reported to me promoted. That was a distinct, because as a new leader, you're oftentimes struggling to find empirical measurements that you can track for success for yourself, right? As you know. So you're saying, what is success to me as a leader? What does success look like, et cetera? And as a new leader, you're constantly going through and asking those questions. And you know, from my perspective, when I first started to ask myself, what is success to me? I looked at it from a human perspective as well, right? Can I show growth to the individual contributors reporting to me? Can I continue to, press them and push them into areas that they may not be comfortable to? Similar to what you used to do with me at Trend Micro, pushing me into areas that I may not be natively comfortable with, but is a great growth opportunity. And you were fantastic at that, as was Martin. And that was one of those things that, I try to kind of look at success in the same way for my individual contributors whenever they reported to me, was if I can get them promoted based on the good merits, the work they're doing, et cetera, that to me is a success metric. And that's the way I view that. So I would say the biggest one was the first time I was able to get someone promoted that reported directly to me and they were doing that job, et cetera.
How do you think about success overall for you?
Oh, interesting. Okay. I would say I view success as a combination of technical completeness and integrity with technical component of what I do, while also marrying up the people leadership aspect of being highly open and communicative, diverse in the way in which I approach my team logistics and team makeup and breakdown, et cetera, and making sure that the team is happy. So I'd say success across the board is both from a technical perspective, but also the leadership perspective, and combining those both into business outcomes. And as long as those business outcomes are positive and everything is kind of in that realm, I think is a good kind of barometer. And that's where I basically gauge myself, is technical completeness, integrity, and accuracy, and then the people leadership aspect and combining those two together.
That accuracy is interesting because I spent a lot of time in the security space, obviously, and that becomes an interesting question. It's like, all right, accuracy versus, I don't want to say efficacy, but do we move forward or do we get it right?
Or do we get it right first? And especially in intelligence, that's hard because it's a decision matrix based typically on time.
And a sample of a sample.
Sample of a sample or infrastructure. And you're dealing with something that's temporal in nature that's likely to change soon, right? Because it's indicator based. So typically here's a file hash. Well, the efficacy and the usefulness of that file hash is going to degrade over time. And, so from our perspective, it's a time equation that we're oftentimes taking into account too, to say, is this something that is timely that can be actioned by our customers? And if that answer is no, then we need to figure out a different way to productionize that intelligence or use that intelligence.
How has your approach to building trust within your team evolved over time?
So I think one of the hallmark tenets of a good leader is the ability to do cross-collaboration across teams, not working in an individual silo. And especially in the intelligence field, working in a silo is very easy and something that is natively very, very
natural.
It's very natural. So as a threat intelligence function, breaking those barriers down and really making sure that you cross-collaborate. As part of that, building the trust with the team involves showing them the collaboration that you're doing, showing them the benefit of that collaboration. As an example, maybe it's access to new telemetry data from a new product that your company's introducing. Building that bridge with that product, with the product that is in the organization itself, to basically say, hey, how can we ingest that telemetry data? Here's the objectives with that data. We're going to be hunting for it, writing detections and signatures and everything else. How is it that we go about doing that? So building trust cross-collaboratively, building trust across the organization is paramount in terms of your team, right? Because you need to build that up and out, get them exposed up and out outside of your own organizational unit. And that's the way to build success for that team. So for me, building trust involves bridging that gap across the teams. And from a technical component or a technical skill set, working technically with those teams, like literally contributing and saying, here's an engineer that you can work alongside to develop whatever the case is, or to ingest that data. So kind of combining it with up and out communication and the technical components together is kind of, in my opinion, what builds trust, not only up and out, but also down and into your own organization, right? Because I look at trust as two directions, up and out to the organization and other teams, and down and into your own team structure, et cetera.
Nice. One of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about in this space is getting new people in, getting them trusted, getting them connected. How do you approach that?
That is, as you said, a challenge. The first aspect is getting someone trained up, right? Because there's a lot of tools that we use, everything from Altigo all the way down to TIPS environments and everything else. And from that perspective, getting somebody spun up across the training is a challenge, especially in our field, right? Some of the tactics that I take with that is, first of all, exposing those individuals to conferences. I know that sounds strange, but if you can build in someone, the excitement from a conference like Black Hat DEF CON, where you're around peers, I mean, I get to see you after all these years, being able to go out and do that is really refreshing. It's really one of those things that invigorates, especially early in career folks, to really dive in and kind of run with that technical expertise. So I'd say conference attendance is one big thing. I think enabling folks with training budget on an annual basis is also important, right? So getting someone the ability to pursue training that might be a little bit out of their wheel set or wheelhouse. So it could be machine learning training as an example. That's one common training that threat intelligence teams are kind of, shifting some of their threat intel focus to. So giving that exposure for training, giving the opportunity for that training on an annual basis, I think is also extremely important and shows that you're committed to developing that individual over time as well, right? So it lends into that too. So I'd say those are a couple different tactics that I take. I'm also a part-time college professor. So as part of that, giving my own training and breaking down complex hunting concepts, from both an infrastructure perspective and also from a file perspective, also goes a long way because I'm just natively comfortable with doing instruction. So I try to do some of that instruction myself and in-house as well.
You mentioned ML. I'm going to take us off on a little tangent.
Sure.
We can see where this goes.
Okay.
Especially talking about like bringing new people into the space. One of the things I'm seeing a lot of is this notion that good AI should reduce the need for people on the ground, boots on the ground to do the thing. What are your thoughts?
I don't think we're there yet. I think that, there could be a time where you can reduce analyst count based on, LLM usage, quote unquote, Gen AI usage, but I don't feel like we're there yet. I still feel like there's some hurdles that we need to overcome from that perspective specifically. But I can foresee the benefits and value. Like one example is doing clustering on malware families, right? On like behaviors from malware families or infrastructure, like registrants as an example on infrastructure, so on and so forth. So there's good opportunities. I just don't think we're quite there yet. I think also there is a relative skill gap in the threat intelligence and threat research fields where, I think we do need to come up to get better at the machine learning aspect and that kind of thing.
So let me flip that around. Do you think the concurrence of LLM, Gen AI, and the skill gap is going to help or hurt?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it depends on your perspective. I think early in career folks will have a harder time getting into a career field. As an example, if you're an early in career coder right now, it's going to be harder to get a job because LLMs are doing some rudimentary coding.
Doing basic stuff.
Basic stuff. That used to be a tier 1 computer scientist. I think that is more at risk. And I think also there could be a possibility for almost a drain of some sort on early in career knowledge, right?
That's what I worry about.
Yeah, that's what I worry about as well. Because early on, when you and I got into computer security, you learned from the ground up. You learned
to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. You had to learn how to configure a firewall and what RFC 1918 space was and go through all of that yourself manually. Now you can bypass a lot of that. And that is all knowledge and foundational knowledge that is extremely important, as you know, in our field.
We rely on that every day.
Every day you rely upon that. And then it just continues to build over time. So from that perspective, I think there's a risk of having a drain on early in career knowledge base due to this, because the efficiency of these tools make it so efficient to bypass all that early on knowledge.
I was having a conversation with somebody here at Black Hat, and the realization was struck that like we are not making wizard C coders anymore.
Correct. Not at all.
These people don't exist. I'm sure there are some out there, and
of course
they would argue them.
Cherish
but in general, that's not a career path that people willingly go on. That's scares the crap out of me.
It does too.
We're gonna 10, 15 years from now, we're not going to have people who know how to sit down at a problem they've never seen before and figure it out.
Troubleshoot the way that you and I
toy apart exactly figure out what's going on.
Exactly. Yep.
So is there a daily routine you find helpful?
Yeah, there's one thing that I talk about, which is scheduling curiosity. I know that sounds weird.
No, that sounds great.
You know how it is when you're in day-to-day work environment. it's hard to dream up research objects and research ideas. And scheduling curiosity allows me on a daily basis to think outside the box and ask myself, what if, about everything. And that could be, what if I developed a honeypot to do this? Or what if I tracked down this cryptocurrency transaction? Or what if, right? And I schedule that on a daily basis. And I learned that from a previous leader that I had that said, you need to schedule time for research and schedule time for that curiosity. And I feel that that's something that it puts you into the right mental headspace too. When I hit that 1 hour brick per day that I can hit the scheduled curiosity, it allows me to freeform research, just like I used to back on the Trend Micro days and all the other days that I used to do that freeform research. And that, for me, really is refreshing and keeps me grounded to the technical components of my job. So scheduling curiosity is important. And I think that that applies not just to leaders. I think that can apply to researchers in general. To anyone, anyone doing something can schedule curiosity like that.
How do you defend that much time? I love it. If you find yourself unfocused, overwhelmed, how do you get back on track?
Me personally, I go for a run. I like long distance running. And for me, clearing my mental headspace is going out and going for a run. So for me, it's always been endorphin dumps of some sort. And that could be jujitsu in my past or running. But running is kind of where I can really zone out and kind of level set my brain. So if I've had a stressful day or stressful meeting, something like that, go out for a run, I come back mentally, I'm re-engaged and back to a blank slate. So that's for me, is running.
Nice. Do you find yourself completely decoupled, or is that where your brain kind of sorts things out? And
it's kind of funny. It does a little bit of both. So oftentimes, if it's a complex problem, I will separate from it while I'm running to purposely just kind of separate and then reapproach it with fresh eyes after a run, something like that. So I typically try to decouple. I don't try to solve problems while I run. I try to empty my brain and then reapproach the problem after my run with fresh eyes or fresh circumstances. So a little bit, I'm trying to like almost game myself, I guess.
Hey, that's what this is all about.
Tricking that is
doing things, right? is that on our entire industry?
right.
So this is probably a weird question for you, but how do you stay ahead of emerging trends other than blocking dedicated time?
So I would say conference attendance is big. And a good example is here at Black Hat. I mean, we're finding new research every day being released. I watched a really good talk on compromising farming technology, which was a new and interesting way. And it gives you other research ideas, offshoot research ideas, right? So I'd say conferences is a really big one to stay up to date on new and current information. All the typical, blogs and all the typical OSN sources that you typically pull from for all the news sources that we typically get. Unit 42 blog, all the different blogs that are out there, I think is another great way to do that. I think third is, specifically from an intelligence perspective, join trust groups where you can. Trust groups are fantastic opportunities to trade intelligence, trade information, trade tradecraft, and be able to pose questions to other intelligence analysts that you might not know, hey, I have a piece of infrastructure. What would be the best way to analyze this? The intelligence community specifically, is really good at being able to share that type of information. And that's something that I think, new aspiring threat researchers, threat intelligence folks look for, those closed, trusted groups to be able to work inside of, and you'll make great relationships and ultimately get good exposure to different data sets too.
We should probably say one of the best ways to get there is the conference. Get on the conference.
Good point.
Do some talks.
Talk.
Show people what you can do, what you know how to do.
Exactly. Kind of the old school hacker mentality, right? Demonstrate and prove what you can do. And if you do that, typically your community will build naturally and organically that way.
I mean, one of the things I've had varying opinions on over the years, and I'm kind of right now at I want people to go to an event and talk to anybody and everybody, and take DEF CON. Let it take you where it's going to take you. Because even if it's not obviously related to your role at day job, you're still going to make new connections, and those connections will amount to something later, and you have no idea.
You have no idea. Exactly. That has happened so much. I think to anyone that goes out and really participates in quote unquote like a LobbyCon, right? They're going out and participating in that. I think everyone has a story where they have a relationship that has evolved like that, where they never had, it was not directly related to the position when they first met. And over time it evolved. I mean, I think everyone that does this has that same type of story.
How do you approach tough decisions?
It's funny you mention that. The first person that I typically will bounce a tough decision or a tough decision off of is my wife. Because she thinks differently than me, but in a complementary fashion. So I'll oftentimes go to her and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is the problem. am I approaching this logically? Do you see any flaws in the decision that I'm making? What are the gotchas that I'm missing? That type of stuff. So I try to view the problem holistically with a third party that isn't really in the job every day, but knows the role, understands the field, and all of that stuff. So I try to seek outside opinions to see and shoot holes in my decision-making process. So I'm purposely trying to basically pen test my own decision to say, is this flawed? Where can I change this? Is this going to impact the team incorrectly? Is this going to impact the business unit, or the company, anything, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first person that I actually go to. Additionally, I have a couple resources at work that are trusted, sources in terms of consigliere almost, where you can literally rely upon them to say, hey, this is the decision I'm making. So I typically pass it through 2 or 3 different individuals, my wife being one of them, and then 2 individuals at work that I also typically pass those through and say, am I wrong here? Tell me where I'm wrong and be blunt about it, because I don't mind. I'd rather have I don't want to.
I'm asking because I want to know.
I'm asking. Yeah, exactly. I want to know. I don't tell me it looks pretty just because you want me, you think I want to hear nice things.
Right. Yeah, don't tell me. It's okay to tell me this baby's ugly.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you find that the process of preparing the communication for that conversation actually helps organize things?
Absolutely. Oh, that's actually a great point that you mentioned, Ben, is organizing how I'm going to not only defend the decision I'm making, but also explaining the decision and the problem itself oftentimes will lead me to a different conclusion. Meaning, if I'm going to my wife and I'm explaining to her, here's the problem set that I'm approaching, even describing the problem set will sometimes make an adjustment to your approach. Yeah. And that's what I like about that, because you're audibly saying this is the problem. And as you're saying it to yourself and saying, does this make sense? Or is there, and that to me is part of that problem solving to generate the right decision, right? Yeah. Part of that is that metric of going through and saying, am I right or wrong?
What is one thing you do as a leader that you wish more leaders would do?
Have consistent one-on-ones with every individual contributor at a specific time interval. That can be monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, quarterly, but it needs to be consistent. What I've had, luckily I've had the great fortune of having leaders in yourself, Joe Packy, several other folks that have always scheduled, done, good meetings, et cetera. So I'm not saying that due to a lack of seeing that. I just understand that the feedback that I get from a lot of individual contributors is that they want more face time with leadership. Yeah. So ensuring that you have that repetitive time scheduled, et cetera. I think additionally to that, having a leader that understands emotional intelligence, that's literally going to ask how that person's doing, right? From a mental aspect, et cetera, right? Like, how are you doing? Need time off? Sincerely caring about that person. Yeah, exactly. And actually mean it. I don't think that happens enough. And I think that and specifically in our field, it's easy to separate from that because, we're data driven. Yep. We're fact driven. So it's easy to separate the emotional aspect of our role. So I like leadership styles that bring in that emotional intelligence aspect of the role, because that's oftentimes the missing component, especially in intelligence work.
Fair enough. One of the things I find really important with the one-on-ones, and it took me years to kind of key in on this, is you get a very different response pattern if they are reliably scheduled.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because the employee stops worrying about when am I going to get time to talk to my boss.
Good point.
Right. And they just know they have a reliable, repeatable place to have that conversation. So it's not they're not holding on to the baggage of, I've got to remember to talk about these things next time I get FaceTime. It's, I know I'm going to have FaceTime later this week. I can write it down, but you don't need to worry about, you don't need to cause an interruption. You've got time scheduled and it's likely to happen.
That's exactly right. It gives the opportunity. You don't have to take a full 30-minute conversation, right? If the person that you're meeting with says, hey, we only have 10 minutes, take 10 minutes. But at least that individual knows that you're taking the time to carve out time to talk about concerns they have, strategic plans on where they're going in their career, that kind of stuff, right? So I don't know. I tend to view it, again, the emotional aspect needs to be brought into leadership, I think, more often, especially in the intelligence field.
What's your agenda for one-on-ones?
So it depends on the level of individual contributor, depends on several factors, but typically I try to do weekly as often as possible, bi-weekly depending upon the role. But at the least frequent would be bi-weekly.
Yeah. What about agenda? Do you have a kind of a set template?
Typically, yeah. So I will open up with anything from a business perspective or from a technical perspective that needs to be communicated down to that particular individual from the business side. And then outside of that, I open it up to them. So I try to exclusively almost focus on the individual themselves what they need to complete their job effectively. Do they need roadblocks eliminated? What is impacting their ability?
Yep.
Strategic plans also. So I also like to talk about where the team is going, what strategic plans are actioning. Goals and objectives also. So hit on goals and objectives and accomplishment towards the team goal and objectives, etc. So I do have kind of a loose agenda, but I try to just make sure that the focus is on the individual to allow them to open up, ask questions, talk about problems, that kind of thing. Because again, I'm trying to look at it like trying to remove roadblocks to allow them to research and analyze quicker.
Yeah, nice. That's interesting. I open it up to them first.
Yeah.
This is your time. Whatever's on your mind.
Yeah.
Can be a personal thing. It can be work stuff. You can start in with a list. I don't care.
Yeah.
You're first.
Yeah. When
you're out of content, I will hand down. That's an interesting point, though. Sharing the hand down first.
Yeah, I've tried both, and I haven't noticed a big difference in regards to like engagement from either side.
Yeah,
and so that's just kind of the way that I structure it. But I've done it both ways. Yeah. I like it both ways.
Yeah, no, I think the like dedicated open space is critical there.
Yeah,
when you're giving advice to people in the field, what's your go-to? My
go-to is the same recommendations that I give to students in my classes, which is curious. Always be curious. And I'm applying the old school hacker mentality, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying like a black hat, like somebody that's going out and compromising, running ransomware.
What can I make this thing do?
What can I make this thing do? Can I stretch the boundaries of this technology and manipulate what its guardrails are? If that answer is yes, that's good, in my opinion, right?
It's good that they figured it out.
Maybe not good from the technology perspective, but from a purist perspective, being curious about everything in technology is going to take you a very long way in this field, because that's going to lead you to push boundaries of what's possible. That's going to be leading you towards new and groundbreaking research, is pushing those boundaries. So what I try to always say is be curious as much as possible. Show just everything possible, be curious. And I've said that a couple times during our conversation, and I still truly believe in that. That's what I tell my kids. You have to be curious about stuff.
So I guess that pretty nicely dovetails into hiring.
Yeah.
What do you look for? What are your...
Yeah. It's funny you mention that, because we've hired everyone from political science backgrounds down to computer science backgrounds. And I don't really look at like the formal education, et cetera. What I really look for is the individual. Are they hungry to learn? Are they motivated? What is their foundational skill set? Obviously, they have to have foundational skills. But I almost look at it as like a 70-30 or 60-40. If they have 60% of the technical proficiencies that we need, you can train the 40% on top.
Oh, sure.
As long as they have the right mindset. So I'm hiring on mindset as opposed to skill sets. So, whenever I'm involved in the questioning of the interviews, I typically schedule them where it's half technical and then half is thought process questions surrounding, what you might do in a specific scenario, or, those types of things.
Yep.
So that's kind of where I focus whenever I'm kind of looking at that stuff.
All right. How do you screen for the curiosity?
That's a tough question. But oftentimes what I'll do is I'll pose a research question, an open-ended research question, and say, here's a set of circumstances. And I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah, no, I don't want you to.
I'll say,
I don't want you to spill your...
Yeah, but here's a set of circumstances.
Yeah.
How would you approach this problem? What are the deliverables that you would be setting forth as like a business perspective? So here's the set of problems. What is the outcome, the production, the deliverable that you're going to give?
Yeah.
How would you solve this? So I truly treat it as though it's a real world scenario. I just broaden it out a little bit.
Yeah, and it's like talk me through the process.
Yeah. And then, there'll be probing questions where I'll go in and say, okay, explain a little bit more about this and what would you do about that? And have you had that happen in your own personal career before?
Yeah.
And dive in from that perspective. So it's more experiential kind of questioning as opposed to saying, what is RFC 1918 space? Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any red flags you look for in the hiring process and that screening?
Somebody that does not think outside the box, that doesn't creatively problem solve. Someone that truly thinks that they are a rock star is also hard sometimes to manage, because they oftentimes will come into a team environment and think that they are in fact, the end all be all in terms of research. So that's a difficult thing that I'll also try to filter, or at least understand to what degree that is.
Yep.
So those are just some of the things, and I wouldn't say red flags, just things that I pay attention to.
Sure.
But there's nothing that I would like,
there's no
yeah, exactly.
disqualification.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Unless they call me names or something. But outside of that, I mean, I try to truly look at that as an individual, all the pieces as a whole, right? And try to section that and say, okay, yes, they might be a rock star, but do that, how is it that they handle team, how do they handle that team dynamic and things like that? So then I'll explore in that area more. So if I do see something that would be considered like, okay, we need to explore that more, I'll just explore more with more questions.
Yeah.
And then either get to a comfort state or not.
What's your approach to mentoring?
Mentoring, from my perspective, is often done in a collaborative manner. And what I mean is, I mentor an individual, and then I also assign a mentor at a senior level to that individual. So for instance, if we have a principal level researcher, we attach them to the hip with that early in career researcher to basically guide them through how to access telemetry data, how to work with our systems, all of that stuff.
Yep.
I will mentor them from the team perspective, the strategic perspective, team goals, and say, this is where we're going. This is why we're going that way. This is the business decisions behind that. And mentor them in that way so they kind of holistically round out their knowledge set around the business side as well as around the technical side. And so I try to approach it very methodically in that way, where I'll handle the business side in walking through that, and then some of the technical stuff as well. But then the principal or the senior level researcher that I attach to the hip at that early in career researcher is the person that's truly guiding them and saying, this is how you would pivot on this particular type of artifact, and this is how you would structure and cluster this information, and this is why, and guiding them through that. So I try to teach it very much in that way. And then in addition to that, I have weekly one-on-ones with the individual that we're mentoring. And then the senior level individual researcher will typically meet once to twice a week with that person too. So we approach mentoring very structured because we try to play the long game with it. Yeah. Because we really want the individuals to stay there and stay at the company.
Nice. As we're talking about mentoring, what resources do you recommend to people? Could be for mentoring, could be just resources that all of your direct reports should be familiar with, books, podcasts, other tools.
So Unit 42 actually has a really good podcast called Threat Vector. I hate to bring it up on our podcast. It's a really good podcast that covers everything from leadership advice all the way down to breaking down the most technical research that's happening out in the world. I think that's a really good resource. It's fairly new, a little over a year old.
Cool.
So good resource there. I hate to also say this, and it makes me sound horrible, but I wrote a book a couple years back called Operationalizing Threat Intelligence, which is breaking down technical components of threat intelligence and how organizations can use threat intelligence properly, as well as the technical pieces behind that. So how to hunt, pivot, enrich, all of that stuff. I think that's a good foundation for anyone that's looking into the threat intelligence or threat research field. And I specifically co-authored that book for that reason, for someone that was looking into this field, not really understanding what was there, their value derived by the field, et cetera. So I kind of say that as well. And then all the industry blogs, et cetera, that you would typically see. And that's competitors, non-competitors alike. Industry magazines like Dark Reading, et cetera. All of those resources are also excellent to be able to get different takes on different things happening in the industry.
How do you handle the volume?
That
you just said all the blogs. I'm like, I can't even fathom.
It's extremely difficult, and you need a way to organize open source intelligence, because not only the strategic context of what you're pulling from like those blogs, right? So like the strategic context of Russia attacking X, Y, and Z, but you also need to take into account the management of the artifacts and indicators included in that blog. Completely different problem. Completely complex problem. Completely different. So I would answer it in two. That you have to handle the strategic aspect of understanding what's going on in one way, and then you need to understand the technical components and the indicators and the artifacts on the other side. So managing the artifacts and indicators can happen in like a centralized repository, like a TIP, something like that, to normalize the data down, structure it, properly tag data, et cetera. That's the technical component. From the other side of that, I would say, it's approaching it with, from my perspective, I use something called TweetDeck quite commonly, which allows you to structure and pull in tweets in certain categories. And that's just one platform. And I'm giving you an example. But I'm able to structure down topics into columns inside a TweetDeck, so I can very quickly say, okay, I'm interested in geopolitical targeting in this particular area. And I can put a column in TweetDeck that allows me to structure strategic intelligence just on that. So I structure it differently, or think of it differently. Strategic intelligence for all of the content that you're seeing, and then the technical components that needs to be derived. And those are distinctly separate to some degree when you're thinking of it managing. Now, they should talk, et cetera, but I think of organization of it separate.
So if you take your day, how much of it is strategic intelligence, looking at the playing board, looking in the field, versus technical intelligence, versus other stuff? Other content in terms of keeping up in what.
So I would say it differs as you go up the chain of command, I would say.
Okay.
Meaning as the lower the chain of the command, the more time, in my opinion, you spend on the tactical side, the technical side.
Yeah.
Indicator to indicator, artifact to artifact, writing signatures, right?
Okay. Yep.
As you go up, you start to become more strategic in the way in which you approach intelligence because you have different stakeholders and different individuals that care about what you're saying. And they have different things that they care about. As an example, an individual analyst may not care about the ransomware targeting the retail industry specifically, but a CSO would, or CISO would. They would care about specific industry targeting and verticals. So you have to be able to communicate the strategic aspect up and out while you're communicating the technical aspect down and in. So I would say from my perspective, I'm typically spending 20% of my day on the strategic aspect of understanding how to communicate the strategic buckets and what's going on from the threat landscape and telling our customers that, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then I would say probably 20 to 30% of my time on the technical side. And then kind of left over is the bucket side, which is where I schedule curiosity. I schedule that type of stuff. So that's kind of my rough breakdown, but it changes daily, to be honest. Just depends on what's going on in the industry.
Nice.
Yeah.
You're a professor.
You
teach?
Yeah, part-time. Yeah.
What are your other big pieces of advice to your students?
I would say some of the advice that I give my students is self-publish. Oftentimes, I had the wonderful opportunity that the first research job I had was at Trend Micro, and I had a public blog where as long as I passed the mustard for that, I got published under my own name. And that was a huge benefit to me on creating your own brand.
Sure.
So what I try to tell everyone in these classes and in the classes... Yeah, exactly. Is build your brand. And you may not have that capability now. You may not work for Trend Micro or Palo Alto or Maltego to be able to blog directly on those corporate blogs. Yeah. But you can sure start up a Medium blog and start to publish on a ransomware family that you reverse engineered and did some correlation on. Nothing is stopping you from going out and starting your own GitHub page where you're putting your own scripts. Because at the end of the day, when your resume passes the table, everything looks great on paper, but what is it that you've actually done and what can they prove? Meaning, is there anything in the public sector that can be shown that says, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Here's some scripts, et cetera. So I constantly impress upon folks, build your own brand and do that by doing hands-on work. Because that's how folks are going to look and say, okay, yeah, you do know malware analysis. I can read exactly. I can read how your thought process is on paper, and that's good. Second piece I give to my students is communicate. Effectively learn how to communicate, because that is the missing piece in a lot of folks in the threat research and threat intel field, is that capability to communicate what you're finding and how you're finding it and the impact of what you're finding. So communication is key, as well as making sure that you're going out and, stressing kind of all those areas that I talked about.
What's the hardest transition you faced moving up your career ladder?
How to deal with decision debt. Decision debt from previous decisions that were made prior to me being a leader or me being at the company even. And understanding the baggage that's associated with some of those decisions, how to correctly
radioactive.
They're usually radioactive, and they're very, it's hard to navigate around that. But that's why it's one of the largest challenges, because you have to understand the organizational aspect, the decisions that came from the organization for that decision. But you ultimately then have to decide, how can I change this in the future to go on a course that I feel is different? So managing and understanding decision debt and how to execute new decision making around that decision debt is a big challenge that I had. Some of the ways that I kind of overcame that was some of the things that we've talked about already, actually. Literally breaking that problem down, discussing it, and communicating it effectively, and then talking about the course of action that I would like to see happen, with justification behind that. So this is why I think it needs to happen. This is the data to prove that. And this is what I think we should do going forward. So managing that decision debt and understanding how to work around the decision debt was something that I had distinct challenges with.
Almost smells like back in high school, wondering why we were studying history.
That's a good point.
Do you see any trends developing that will change how we have to lead our teams?
Generative AI usage, in my opinion. And I see this in students all the time, meaning I will see papers submitted continually that have been highly edited by an LLM of some sort. And I think to some degree that's going to possibly happen in terms of teams and how you lead that. So measuring artificial intelligence use appropriately early on, and making sure that it's not being abused to basically just replicate work, et cetera. But I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that we'll need to find out and navigate around, is how to properly integrate generative AI into our workflows, especially in the intelligence field. When LLMs can hallucinate, sometimes the accuracy is called into question.
Some copyright
protect. Yeah, exactly. So as an intelligence person, when you see all those things, it immediately starts raising red flags because it calls into question the integrity of the data that you're producing. So that's what I think is one of the larger challenges. It's a huge benefit, and it could be a massive benefit for teams, but it could also be a risk. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Thinking about students, thinking about junior people who were trying to kind of mentor up the ladder, get into the trusted community. What is your recommendation to them in regards to generative AI and tools like that?
Use it to do the functions that you already know how to do. As an example, if you already know how to pull strings and look for any unique strings in a binary, have an LLM do that for you automatically. Right? You already know how to do it. It's nothing that's complex.
You know what the output's
supposed to look like. You expect certain types of outputs. And you know if there is a problem with the data that's being presented to you. So help it offload the menial tasks that you already know how to do, and you know how to interpret that data natively. Leverage the tool to do that, but don't just blindly trust. You must verify that data in all costs. And that's everything across the intelligence fields that way. But especially so when you're talking about this, because you want to make sure that the LLM is not hallucinating, et cetera, especially on the intelligence side.
One of my big sticking points with generative AI in general is the individual, the human being, the person holding the chair to the floor is responsible for the final content. Don't come to me and say, oh, I'm sorry, the AI did that.
Exactly.
No, you did that. You asked the AI to do that. You took the output of that. You are responsible for that output. The other big piece of that is you should only be using, in my opinion, generative AI for things you know how to do.
Precisely. Agreed.
Right. If you can't interpret the results and decide that the output is valid and accurate, I mean, the whole point of the tool is to create realistic looking output.
Exactly. So trusting, and that's why I say, falling back on the things that you already know how to do, that you can use generative AI to augment and speed up. So I'm looking at it as a way to speed up analysis and enrichment and production on stuff that we're already doing. I'm not looking at it as new ways to exploit data or to manipulate data in a new way. I'm looking at it as carving off time from menial tasks that we're already doing.
So unfortunately, that's all the time we've got for today. Before we wrap up, if people want to follow along with your work, where's the best place to go?
Unit 42 blog. I do a lot of publishing on the blog itself, and then my LinkedIn page. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, everything from job posts on Unit 42 down to new research that we're conducting. So 2 kind of most common places that you can find me.
Don't forget the book. And I actually bought the book.
Oh, thanks.
Didn't realize it was you until I got it. I'm looking... Oh, I know this guy. So amazing. All right. Thank you. It's been an awesome conversation.
Awesome.
Great to see you again.
Great to see you too.
Safe travels.
Awesome. Hopefully we do it again.
Let's do it again sometime.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.